Welcome to your weekly dose of the Dropkick Discussions podcast. First of all, you might be wondering why the voice you're listening to right now is a little bit unusual. Well, here's an apology for anyone that was looking forward to hearing the sultry southern tones of Corey Guns. Sadly, he's on assignment this week, by which I mean he's sitting on a bench somewhere as far as we know. But I'm filling in for him. And you might be wondering who I am. I'm Gary Cassidy. You might have heard me on Corey's podcast about The Fiend a few weeks back, or even on our YouTube channel. There's some exclusive interviews with the likes of Matt Riddle, Chris Van Vliet, Joe Coffey, pretty much all across the board, WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling. We've got interviews across the board with all of them, and that's where you might hear me if you're not too put off with hearing my voice in this particular chat. One man who's definitely going to be familiar to you. I'm joined today by Pro Wrestling Insider Tom Colohue, who's taken his regular seat to chat all things wrestling with me. How are you doing today, Tom?
I'm doing good. Probably the best plus about regular seats in a podcast is it's literally my couch at home.
That's not too bad at all. So yeah, thanks for being on. I would say there's only one place to start this week, but that's probably the least true thing that I'm going to say across this full podcast. I think it's one of the biggest weeks in, I don't want to say wrestling history, that might over-exaggerate it, but certainly over the past decade or so, I think. Man, such a busy week. Mainly because SmackDown's going to have their debut show on Fox this week. What are your thoughts on how WWE and Fox have built up to this debut? I mean, the amount of names on the show are absolutely incredible. We've recently heard that The Rock's going to be appearing. How's it shaping up for you?
Well, this one's been a long time coming. We've seen Rey Mysterio going to the NFL games. We've seen so many people appearing. There's going to be people appearing on Fox and Friends. I believe Kofi Kingston's one of the ones who's going to be there. Fox are really pushing it hard, and it's a very exciting time because it's a completely new casual fan base. It's much more available. It's much more advertised. It's exciting to be a fan like that, but WWE are going all out for this. They've got the match between Lesnar and Kofi. They've got The Rock coming. They've announced so many legends just who are going to be there. We don't know how, but in the same breath, they've announced a 4 horsewomen tag match as an example. It's going to be jam-packed, but there should be something for everyone. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Definitely, man. And you mentioned there about Brock Lesnar. So one of the most exciting things, I think, was it came out of nowhere, Brock Lesnar on SmackDown. And then the match got announced as his first match on Raw or SmackDown for, I believe, somewhere in the region of 15 years. I might be off with that number, I'm not certain, but a long time anyway. Now, he appeared on Raw last night. So I believe you've got a little bit of information to share about that.
I do. And even before this show, I was told, maybe don't take it as read that Brock Lesnar is a SmackDown guy now. In fact, don't take it as read that anyone is an anything guy right now. We saw Heavy Machinery getting a Raw Tag Team Championship match. We've got the Revival, who are apparently a Raw team, and SmackDown Tag Champions now. Going into the draft, there is no wild card because no one is anything. No one is Raw, no one is SmackDown. There's a lot of possibilities with Brock Lesnar. He could win that title, The Fiend could win a title, and the two could change brands again. It could be that the match doesn't even take place, similarly to how Rey Mysterio against Seth Rollins was supposed to. And certainly with Dominic being involved in the beating he took, we might see Rey on SmackDown very soon. There's a lot of possibilities, and I think we just have to avoid keeping it so ironclad in our heads as to who is where.
Yeah, well, the reason I think wrestling's so exciting, particularly this week, but just right now in general, is we have no idea what's going to happen at all. Anything is literally possible, and none more so than another match that's, well, may or may not be happening on SmackDown. Kevin Owens, he could be fired, but will he be fired from WWE? Again, I believe you've got a pretty strong opinion on what might happen there.
A pretty strong opinion is definitely the right way to phrase this one. I think a lot of people have not been fans of how Shane McMahon has been used. That's not necessarily a bad thing. He's a heel, but he's had wins against some big names, and he's been pushed hard. Honestly, with the fact that it's not at Hell in a Cell, this match, I do kind of expect Shane McMahon's going to win this. He's got too many friends. He's got Elias. He's got Drew McIntyre. Kevin Owens has no one, especially now that he's a face again and Sami Zayn has found a new friend to go and play with. I suspect we might see Kevin Owens get fired, but I have to wonder where he's getting fired from. They haven't mentioned it. It's a company. And with a draft coming, surely this just means he's going back to Raw, which isn't much of a shock. Kevin Owens changes every single time there's a shake-up, same as The Miz. He's on the different show every single time.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good shout. I really wish I could disagree with you, but I sadly cannot. The only place I might differ in opinion is I definitely think he's going somewhere that's not SmackDown. I don't know if the NXT rumours have been a bit too much that it might not be NXT, but man, he's going to be a great addition no matter where he goes. But yeah, that's on Friday night. So it's the first time SmackDown's been on a Friday for quite a long time, and the first time it's live on a Friday. With that, it means that Raw actually had a little bit of breathing room. Now I think it's quite nice that we've got such a gap between the two shows, but there was things that we're going to see on both shows this week. For instance, Brock Lesnar, who's going to be, as far as we know, scheduled to be on SmackDown. He was laying waste to Dominic. Last night's Raw was essentially the go-home Raw for Hell in a Cell, but I mean, SmackDown's a lot closer to Hell in a Cell since it's only 2 days out from it. But on Raw, we saw The Fiend. He definitely made his presence felt, and I think he's one of maybe the biggest deals heading into Hell in a Cell, if not the biggest deal. Do you think we could see him in SmackDown, or do you think we might see separation going forward? What do you think is going to happen in terms of Raw and SmackDown going forward? Do you think they're going to be competing for ratings? And how do you think Hell in a Cell will play out with the two being on or kind of split apart so far on the week before it?
It's hard to tell, but I think it's a very good thing that we have Survivor Series so close, where they've always historically been, well, I say always historically, since this incarnation of the brand split, we've had Raw against SmackDown. I think it's a good thing that we'll have that immediate competition very close around the corner. I think this might be the first time that SmackDown actually wins the event, especially after the clean sweep last year with Raw. I've been reassured that is the plan, that we're going to have that, but they need to have the brand, the draft, everything, the roster's set before that happens. Bray Wyatt could go absolutely anywhere. He's been appearing pretty often on both shows. He's an unforgettable presence. He brings ratings wherever he goes. I don't know whether he's more Raw or more SmackDown, whereas previously you can look at the show and sort of work out who fits the bill a bit more. With a couple of misnomers, Finn Balor for me was always on the wrong show until recently.
Yeah.
I think it depends, obviously, who ends up being the WWE champion, because they do like to trade belts over. They haven't done it with world titles yet, but I'm confident the Fiend's going to become a champion very soon, so that may play into it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the kind of the biggest enigmas for me, is just that, man, you're going to think they're really going to want to separate Raw and SmackDown, but how much are the two networks going to be fighting over people like The Fiend? Because, man, he's just news. He's the biggest news in WWE right now, and then obviously there's Brock Lesnar. You've got to think, do they try and have one of them on each brand, or are there going to be people that float in between? But, I mean...
Absolutely. I think it's very telling that we're talking about Bray Wyatt balancing out someone as monumental as Brock Lesnar. That's where we are now, that Bray Wyatt, despite having very little actual championship runs at all, his world championship reign was very short. He won only, I believe, 2 matches. His tag championship reign was very short. I believe he won only 1 match. But at the end of it, because of the way he's created this character, and especially going into an event like Hell in a Cell, it's custom made for him.
Yeah, and here's going to be probably the most controversial comparison I ever make in my life. But one person that you could say has had a similar rise to Bray Wyatt, albeit on a smaller scale and in a much shorter amount of time, Rusev has recently come back into the fold and immediately got a title shot last night, which then, if anybody's seen Raw, you'll know how it's unfolded.
Yeah.
Rusev a few weeks ago was quote unquote unveiled as the father of Maria Kanellis' baby. I think we can say that's not the case, maybe. But then the Lana Lashley angle unfolded yesterday. I know you've got a little bit of insight into Rusev's time away from WWE. What's your thoughts on that, or what have you been told on that, and what are your thoughts on his sudden re-emergence is a pretty big deal?
Well, I know that the Rusev Day push was a very genuine one from WWE's point of view. They did want to push him, and with the fans behind him, they really wanted to push him hard. He got big wins over Daniel Bryan, Samoa Joe at the time. He had a World Championship match against AJ Styles. He had a long run of tag matches with Aiden English in which both men came out looking tremendous. And then, just before he left, so it was around WrestleMania time, he was there a few weeks after WrestleMania and then vanished. He was in a tag team with Shinsuke Nakamura. He, at that point, to my knowledge, has requested some time away, very similar to how Sasha Banks requested some time away. That's been granted. Same for Lana. Lana went off, pursued her own things. She's been quite prominent on Twitter and photo shoots and so on. Rusev, a couple of reimaginings. We've seen a couple of different hairstyles and now the mustache. But you're right, he's come back and, at least in that Raw, was immediately thrust into quite a prominent position. It's not just a championship match, it was a main event as well. And this was a Raw where they were trying to close off storylines, which is why you had quite a few rematches. Cedric Alexander and AJ Styles, they had that match. It seems relatively closed off now. Lacey Evans and Natalya, same thing. It's a season premiere, as it were, so they wanted to write off things that were coming in, especially leading into a draft now. They need people's storylines to end, but they also needed people who they knew the plans for to start and kick off hard. So Rusev in that position, very good. And then you see the storyline they've given him, maybe not so much.
Yeah, it's a little bit odd, but I'm quite open to seeing how it plays out.
Yeah, we'll trust the process.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But I think for me, what's great about the Rusev thing, I've always been quite a big fan of his anyway. But the way he's come back in, again, you drew a parallel there with why he was away, asking for time off, like Sasha Banks. But the way that both of those have come back in, it seems like they're, I don't want to say a bigger deal than ever, because yet again, I might be sensationalising it a little bit. But considering all the chatter that had been going on online about them having backstage heat and all of this kind of thing, both of them have come back and they're probably like two of WWE's top superstars right now. I don't know what's your opinion on that. I don't know if this falls somewhere in journalistic integrity, or if it's just people thinking that when someone disappears, it must be a bad thing. But do you think them coming back and being thrust into the limelight the way that they are shows that maybe it's not always a bad thing when someone disappears for a few weeks or months?
Well, I think first off, the best thing to say is that absence makes the heart grow fonder. So time away for anyone will be beneficial. Corey Guns, our esteemed colleague, is taking a week off. I'm sure next week they'll be kicking the doors down and screaming his name, chanting, trying to get him involved back in this podcast. And then you have, like you say about journalistic integrity, there is, and I think we're all guilty of this to some degree. We see it in politics, we see it in education. There is a need to sensationalize. Because the majority of life, and I'm sure we've all had this at times, it's a bit boring. So we don't want to read stories about the boring everyday lives that most people live. We want sensation. We want drama. This is one of the reasons that we're wrestling fans. This is one of the reasons you get soaps and dramas and daytime TV is so popular, because it has these sensational, larger-than-life characters. You're not watching Game of Thrones expecting a long day at the market picking which fruit to buy, stuff like that. And I think when you have no information, it starts to bring out the worst in people. I can think of a few people who, with the whole situation with Kylie Rae, they didn't have any information, but they wanted to give people something. So information magically appeared.
Yeah, it seems like the information gets created out of people trying to find, you would say maybe logical reasons, but sometimes or maybe they're more often than not that logical. But yeah, you can see why these kind of things get created. But I think the Rusev and the Sasha Banks stories is like when they come back and are in such prominent positions, it's kind of a big middle finger to those stories.
Absolutely. I think Sasha Banks's chronicle was very much exactly that. And I want to make it clear, I don't particularly blame journalists in question. If they have multiple verified sources who are saying this is the situation, then it's their job to research that, find out more, and find out what's true. That's the role of a journalist. But at the same time, you have to ask the question, who is this information benefiting?
Yeah.
What harm could this do? Does the public need to know this? Because you take one thing about Sasha Banks and suddenly everyone has a different opinion. The story snowballs, it goes in all different directions. In reality, as far as I know, and as far as she has explained herself, she just needed some time to relax. How dare she? You know? We're all human. We all need time sometimes.
Yeah, that's especially if you're working 300 days a year and on the road for all of them. That's also got to have something.
Yeah, it is a grueling schedule they do. I do not envy them.
No, definitely not. And well, kind of. That's two people that I think we'll be seeing a lot more of. Who knows if we'll see them or at Hell in a Cell? Well, one of them we definitely will. But yeah, you don't know about whether Rusev will be there or not. But I was going to say, it's quite peculiar that we don't really know who we're going to see at Hell in a Cell. We know maybe a good 10 names roughly around that, but there's only a handful of matches confirmed at the most. Probably the lowest that we've had after a Raw going into a pay-per-view for quite a long time. Why do you think that is? Do you think that's maybe a byproduct of the SmackDown move to Fox? Do you think it's anything to do with like concentration being on 3 brands now with the quote-unquote Wednesday Night Wars? Maybe a lot of their attention is going to Fox, a lot to even the Raw premiere, the season premiere, and NXT. Why do you think we've got so little confirmed for Hell in a Cell so far?
I wouldn't say it's anything to do with Wednesday nights, mostly because from everything I've been told, Vince McMahon has said to Triple H, all right, you handle that, and has almost entirely left him to it. That Wednesday nights is a domain of Triple H now, and that is how it's going to be for the foreseeable future. At the same time, Vince McMahon has oversight, absolutely, but Raw has been largely left to Paul Heyman, and SmackDown has been largely left to Eric Bischoff. So I wouldn't say it's in relation to anything AEW are doing or anything like that. I think it's down. A lot of it is down to the move to Fox, and I think a lot of it is down to the draft, because Vince McMahon is notorious for making very late decisions, and from everything I'm hearing, the creative team, even people to the level of Paul Heyman, Eric Bischoff, Triple H, are not fully aware of who they are going to have to work with at and after Hell in a Cell. As such, the creative team are simply stuck in a position where they have to either write storylines to an end by then, or keep going long-term storylines knowing that they're going to lose certain players. Let's say the Roman versus Rowan feud that's going on. Let's say Rowan gets moved to Raw. Well, you've got to end that. You've got to end that now. So they've got a match at Hell in a Cell, which is potentially the end of the whole thing. And it feels rushed because that might happen and they've had to rush that. At the same time, can they risk putting matches onto Hell in a Cell when they're not going to be the final match in a series? Look at, for example, Bayley Carmella looks like it's going to be appearing on Hell in a Cell. Maybe we were going to get another Bayley Charlotte match. Maybe that was supposed to continue, but now we don't know where either Bayley or Charlotte are going to be after Hell in a Cell. I think it's more of that, and with not knowing who you have to work with, it's hard to say who you want to win matches.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, a little bit of, maybe there's been confusion in what's going to happen after a certain date, and now things are seemingly getting a little bit rushed. But I guess we just need to see how it all plays out. One person who might be added to the fold, someone who apparently has re-signed this week. There's not been any confirmation, I don't believe, from WWE or from them yet, but John Morrison has reportedly came back. Johnny Impact, Johnny Mundo, whatever you want to call him. I think a lot of people will remember him probably quite fondly from his run as John Morrison and most things he's done after that. Do you have any insight into whether he's actually signed, or even a prediction at least as to where he might fall, whether he goes to NXT or Raw or SmackDown if and when he's back?
This is unfortunately one of those where I have to hold my hand up and say I've heard absolutely nothing. But I will say I am very excited. The best live match I've ever seen was at a Preston City wrestling show just around the corner from me, and it was John Morrison against Will Ospreay. And the 3 or 4 matches that followed were ruined because they put on such a good match. That was the same night I got a picture of Matt Hardy, and that was quite a highlight, but it wasn't as much of a highlight as the match that came before. Shortly after that, a couple of months later, I saw AJ Styles in the flesh against Lionheart, which was an incredible match. Still didn't live up to it. And I'm very excited to see him go up against Ricochet, up against Styles, up against Balor, up against Nakamura. There are so many people that he could go up against. I can see him being a surprise draftee. I think they're trying to get Hell in a Cell sort of out the way at this point, so that they can go into making new things start and so on and so forth. So I think if he has signed, the WWE will be sitting on it for now. I think he'll be going to Raw. I think we'll have Johnny Raw rather than Johnny SmackDown. And I think he'll add quite a lot to everything there.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Ricochet. One of my favourite, I obviously loved John Morrison when he was in WWE the first time round, but I was a huge fan of Lucha Underground, and that was actually oddly where I got introduced to Ricochet when he was there as Prince Puma. I wasn't too well versed with him aside from that, but man, the matches he had with John Morrison or Johnny Mundo when he was there, if we can get them in a WWE ring, get him on the same brand as Ricochet. That is my only hope.
Absolutely. I wouldn't even say that you need him to be pushing for championships. I would have every 2 weeks John Morrison against someone new, and that'd be it for a year. Just exhibition matches, because you know they're going to be fantastic.
The John Morrison Open Challenge sounds
exactly.
like it definitely be a thing that happens. But what we've been talking so much about Raw and SmackDown, there's a little something else happening this week. Wednesday Night Wars, quote unquote. I don't like putting that phrase on it, but I feel like it is coming into play more and more often. We've got NXT on Wednesday nights. We've got AEW on Wednesday nights. Well, we don't, because we're based in the UK, sadly.
Absolutely, yeah.
But they are a thing. Tuesday night seems to be the only night so far that we don't have any wrestling. We've got Impact that's going to be on that very, very soon. Man, how much more busy is everyone's schedule going to get when we've got Raw on a Monday, Impact on a Tuesday? Hopefully in the UK we'll also have AEW and NXT on a Wednesday at some point. We've got NXT UK on a Thursday, SmackDown on a Friday, Saturday's hopefully a free day, and then you've got whatever pay-per-views happening on on the weekends every once in a while. But man, what do you think about what NXT over the past 2 weeks has had? About 1 million viewership or over that both times. AEW, it's yet to be kind of established what their viewership will be. We won't know until it happens and until that comes out. Raw and SmackDown are seemingly, well, you don't want to say still going strong because Raw's just had the season premiere. We don't know the figures for that yet. SmackDown hasn't been yet. How do you think wrestling is going to be going forward? That might be a really general question, but what do you think is going to
You covered a lot of bases there, but I'll start with the schedule. There are times when, and you'll know this as much as I do, it is extremely difficult being a wrestling fan in the UK. Yeah. I remember I invite friends around for certain pay-per-views. So, for example, we would have a takeover on the Saturday night, the Royal Rumble on the Sunday night. I'd have friends around for the Royal Rumble. We'd have a few drinks. Every time someone gets eliminated from a Royal Rumble, you have a shot. The second Royal Rumble is hell. That was a bad idea, but now we do it. And then you have Raw on the Monday. This is all at 1 a.m. So you're up until 3:30 on the Saturday. You're up until maybe 5 in the morning on the Sunday. You're up until 4 a.m. on the Monday, and then you're up until 3 a.m. on the Tuesday if you skip 2 or 5 live. It was extremely difficult, especially when at 6:30 I've got to go to my day job because I don't do this full time. The schedule was just impossible. It's been spread out a bit more, but at the same time, how often do I, as a wrestling journalist, have someone come to me and say, why don't you watch Impact? Well, I try to keep up with Impact, but there is so much wrestling. Well, why don't you have this about this? Why don't you have this about this? Why do you only watch WWE? It's all I have time for.
Yeah, and it's certainly the most accessible one in the
Absolutely.
UK as well.
So we've got AEW now stepping into the system on Wednesdays. I'm not a regular NXT watcher, and I actually offend quite a few people when I say this, but as a wrestling fan, my interest is not in the wrestling. You can put on a 5-hour show of 5-star mat classics. I'm going to get bored after about an hour. I'm just like that. I like the drama. I like the ridiculous storylines. I liked the Attitude Era. I liked knowing that Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels literally wanted to destroy each other whenever they stepped in a ring. I like that. So NXT and AEW, maybe not for me, but I've enjoyed NXT UK. I've enjoyed some of the characters, such as Velveteen Dream, such a good character. And you have quite a lot of them in AEW as well. You have a boy and his dinosaur. You have such fun, different ways of doing things. So they will find ways to hook me in. When it comes to ratings, NXT started very strong.
Yeah.
And they have a very, very powerful captive audience already there, already used to the product, already tuning in. AEW does not have that. They've also said quite strongly they are not there for the casual audience. They are there for the audience that used to enjoy WWE and has lapsed and has stopped watching. How many of those people that have stopped watching have found their way to NXT? They are literally fighting for the exact same viewership. So availability is going to be very, very important. And I think AEW are doing very well in that regard. They're advertising very well. But at the same time, NXT can advertise on Fox and on USA. So I have genuinely no idea. And to be honest, I think it's going to be very over-analyzed because there are unquestionably a lot of people waiting for the AEW rating so that they can say AEW is better because it won or NXT is better because it won. You're not going to know after a week. And I'm going to appeal to everyone to try and stay calm with this one, because even if you get 300,000 views compared to 1.2 million, it's a damn good start.
Yeah, and I think also the ratings aren't going to tell everything, because all they're really going to say is who's watching what show first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone's going to be watching both shows.
Yeah, you have to realize that the modern audience can watch both and can do it without really thinking about it. For us in the UK, it was a 1 a.m. show. I'm going to watch it the next day. I'm probably going to watch it before NXT UK. But which one I'm going to watch first? That depends. I'll probably read up or maybe look at YouTube, see some highlights, find out what happened. That is a very, very good thing, because if you want me to watch your show first, you have to put on the better show. We are seeing that with what NXT are putting together this Wednesday. They are putting on one hell of a show.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely, they've set a nice little standard there. I think, that's definitely a great note to end on. All we can say is what you said there about YouTube is definitely is a good thing, because it's getting this podcast out there too for everyone to listen to. So hopefully everyone liked it. If you did, hit that little thumbs up button, give us a little share on social media, and of course subscribe as well, and you'll get a lot more of these podcasts and a lot more exclusive content in the way of interviews coming your way. So thanks for joining me, Tom. It's been great to chat to you, man.
No, thanks very much for interviewing me today.
Yeah. Thank you, man.